Hello YouTube, CivilianSnowman here, and I've got another video for you today. Now, this video is something that I've seen quite a few YouTubers doing. Kakalaki Movies recently did it and asked for video responses. So I thought I'd, after having a few of my own subscribers ask me to do this, thought why not? So this is going to be my top 20 films of all time, my top 20 favourite films of all time. Now, these films, I've spent literally the last week trying to put them in some sort of order of preference. So while I know most people do it where it's like, oh, you could change these films around and, you know, it wouldn't make much of a difference, I'm actually trying to do it in order of preference as much as I can. Now that is very difficult because some films are like apples and oranges and they don't compare, but yeah, I gave it a go, so this is what I came up with. Okay, so starting with number 20, and that is Park Chan-wook's Oldboy. This is the second chapter in his Vengeance trilogy, which starts with Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, then there's Oldboy, then Lady Vengeance. Oldboy is my favourite of the trilogy, and to be honest, I think the legitimate best film of the trilogy. I used to think that was Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, but Oldboy upon repeat viewings just holds up that bit much more. It's about a guy who is taken prisoner for no reason for 15 years and then released and told that he has to find out who and why he was imprisoned. So it's a really intriguing story and a brilliant revenge movie featuring one of the best hand-to-hand combat scenes I think that's ever been filmed. So Oldboy is my number 20. Now for number 19, there is M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, which is one of the best, if not the best, comic book film ever made. Now it's not based on an existing property. M. Night Shyamalan completely invented it. This is back when he made good films. It's basically about Bruce Willis playing David Dunn, who is in a train accident, a horrific train crash, and is the sole survivor, and he doesn't have a scratch on him, no broken bones, anything like that. He's then, after seeing him in the news, he's then contacted by Samuel L. Jackson, who has a disease which I can't pronounce, which means that his bones are very brittle and break easily, and they form an uneasy friendship trying to get to discover who they really are using each other's perspectives, and it becomes a comic book film, and the way it's shot, everything's framed like panels in a comic book, the colours, everything. It's a beautiful film. It is a fine example of just classical filmmaking. I absolutely love it and thoroughly recommend it. Anybody who didn't see this because of M. Night Shyamalan's reputation now, this is his best film. This is when he was making good films, because I love his first three films. And yeah, I think Unbreakable is without a doubt a masterpiece. That brings us to number 18, and that is Terry Gilliam's Brazil. This is a film that I hadn't seen until last year. It was recommended to me when I was working for the government. Somebody I work with recommended it to me. He's like, I think you'll really dig this film. So I watched it, and I can see why he recommended it to me. It's basically about Jonathan Pryce's character, who works for the Ministry of Information, which is basically just a bureaucratic nightmare. And he dreams of like escaping it all and living a better life. And it's something I could really relate to when it was introduced to me. And it's a film that not only is it a fantastic film, it is beautiful and gorgeous to look at. The production design is just absolutely sumptuous. It's a film that has a real personal relationship to me because I felt like Jonathan Pryce's character last year. So yeah, I would thoroughly recommend Brazil to anyone. I think it is a cult classic, and I think it deserves its classic status. So that's my number 18, Brazil. Number 17 is something a little bit more obscure, and that is Memories of Murder, the Korean film. Now this is a serial killer film, and anybody who knows me knows that I really like serial killer films. I find them fascinating, especially when it focuses on the police and reporters chasing the killer rather than the killer himself, because I always find that the killer's never as interesting as the people who become obsessed by the killer. I find those characters to be much more interesting. Memories of Murder basically spans a couple of decades, I think, actually. It's based on a true story, and it's about a serial killer in Korea who killed a series of women. And the police basically were quite content with just pinning it on anybody. They didn't care whether they caught the right person or not. But as the case goes on and the body count kind of racks up, they start to care, and it gets to the point where they become obsessed with finding the killer, where they're willing to really put their own principles to one side in order to catch him. And it is a fascinating look at the effects of working those types of cases on the police. So yeah, Memories of Murder, absolutely stunning film, thoroughly recommend it. It is it's got to be in my top 20 because I absolutely love it. So that's Memories of Murder. My number 16 is a bit of a classic, and that is Back to the Future. Not the trilogy, mind you. I don't like cheating where I put a series of films in. It's just the first film of Back to the Future. I don't really need to say much about this. It's about Marty McFly travelling back from 1985 to 1955 and going to high school with his own parents. It's a film I grew up watching. I absolutely love it. I love the influence it's had on cinema, and it's full of just classic moments, classic characters. And it is one of the best films ever made, in my opinion. So yeah, that's Back to the Future. Number 15 is a film that I reviewed for the Cigarette Burns, and that is Synecdoche, New York. This is a film I absolutely love. Again, it has a personal kind of link to myself, in that it really speaks to kind of my fears in life. It's about Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, a playwright who's given what's called a genius grant of basically limitless amounts of money in order to make a play of his choice that he can completely create. He does this because the film really tackles the themes of growing old and how life can really pass you by, and how being part of a monotonous routine means that you don't stop and enjoy the little things in life, and how it goes so quickly. I mean, there's a scene where he's having breakfast which actually spans about a year. Because the dates on the milk and the dates on the newspaper, the dates on the news on the TV, they're all different, and it's time passing but in one scene of breakfast, because it's the same thing he does every day. And so it tackles that, and also the fact that you want to leave your mark on the world. And I know it's a very kind of Freudian male perspective, but I do agree that males, probably because they can't have children, want to leave their mark on the world and have some sort of impact on the world around them, which is what he's trying to do with this play that he's making. And basically it becomes about a play within a play within a play, and it's truly fascinating stuff. I absolutely love Synecdoche, New York, and that's why it's in my top 20. At number 14 we have a bit of a classic and my favourite of George A. Romero's zombie films, and that is Day of the Dead. This is kind of the dark horse of the saga, the third in the series, and it's set in an underground military bunker during a zombie apocalypse, and quite a few months have passed. I think off the top of my head it's about 6 months have passed since the apocalypse, and it's about scientists having to coexist with the military and also try and see if basically zombies can be house trained, which features the famous character Bub. It's a film that I don't want to say too much about. I actually reviewed it for the Cigarette Burns. It's my favourite of all his films. I absolutely love Day of the Dead. I mean, I've grown up, me and my friend Danny used to sleep over at each other's houses and stay up all night watching George A. Romero zombie films. So I had to have one in my top 20, and my favourite, as I said, is Day of the Dead, which is why it's here at number 14. Number 13 is one of my favourite horror movies of all time, and that is Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. A film that I no doubt have to really say little about, because I've reviewed it on my channel in the past. I think I reviewed it Halloween 2009. It's fantastic. It's basically a remake slash sequel of Evil Dead. Features Bruce Campbell's now infamous character Ash fighting the possessed corpses of his friends, and it is just one of the most fun horror films ever made. It really has that kind of Three Stooges sense of humour to it, what we call now splatstick, and back in the day when it came out it was a video nasty and was banned and shit like that, but it is just so much fun. And when on Halloween there is no better film to pop in if you have your friends around and watch that. It's Evil Dead 2. I mean, I remember last Halloween when I had my own place, I had all my friends around, we had lots of beer, lots of pizza, watched Evil Dead 2, Drag Me to Hell and Trick or Treat, and it was a brilliant brilliant night. So yeah, that's Evil Dead 2. Number 12 is a fairly recent film, and you may notice there are a few recent movies on my in my top 20, but I'm a believer that a film doesn't have to be old to be one of your favourites. You know, I don't feel I should have to justify my choices based on age. So this is a film I absolutely adore, and that is The Darjeeling Limited, the Wes Anderson movie, starring Adrian Brody, Owen Wilson and Jason Schwartzman. Now, I know that a lot of people who like Wes Anderson really don't like this film. It seems to be their least favourite of Anderson's movies, but to be honest, I think it's leaps and bounds ahead of his other films. I've seen most of his films, not all, but most, and The Darjeeling Limited is just the best film. It's legitimately the best one. I think it's the most well made and the most well shot. The music choices are the best, the acting, everything. I absolutely love it. It's basically about three brothers who haven't spoken in the last year since their father died, go on a road trip together through India to find their mother and to basically discover themselves and all that and become closer as brothers. And the trip kind of falls apart, but it's only when it falls apart that they really get to go on the journey that they wanted. So it's a very kind of, it sounds kind of cliche and whatnot, but it's done in such a beautiful way, and I do think it is a beautiful little gem of a movie and recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it. So that's The Darjeeling Limited. Number 11 is a film that I absolutely adore, and it's my favourite film from this particular director, and that is Chasing Amy, directed by Kevin Smith. Now, I'm a massive fan of Kevin Smith. I especially love his films set in his Viewer Schoonerverse, where he has recurring characters throughout all his movies. I think recently I haven't liked his movies. I didn't like Zack and Miri, and I haven't bothered with Cop Out yet. But most of his films I absolutely love, but Chasing Amy is definitely my favourite. But it's about Ben Affleck falling in love with a lesbian, and then and their relationship and how that affects his relationship with his best friend, Banky Edwards, played brilliantly by Jason Lee. And it's a film, I guess you could consider it to be a chick flick, but it is probably the best chick flick ever made, along with Kill Bill. But yeah, Chasing Amy, I absolutely love it. The dialogue is some of the best I think that's ever been written. The acting in it is fantastic, and you have to remember that these guys back then were kind of amateurs. They've done some films, but not many, so the acting's really, especially from Jason Lee, is just jaw-dropping. And as I said, I honestly think it's Kevin Smith's best, most mature film, and closely followed, this is always a controversial choice, but closely followed by Jersey Girl. I really do love Jersey Girl, but Chasing Amy is definitely his best, and I really recommend it. I absolutely love it. So that's my number 11. I think I'm actually going to have to change position because this video's taking a bit longer than I thought it would. I'm starting to lose light, so yeah, I'll move the camera and try and get a bit more light for numbers 10 to 1. Okay, I think the lighting's slightly improved now. I've got a lamp on, I've got the big light on above me and whatnot, so you should be able to see more. So yeah, it's time to do numbers 10 to 1. Starting with number 10, naturally, and that is Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. This is my favourite of Tarantino's movies. Now, I know a lot of people kind of have a love-hate relationship with Tarantino. I know quite a few people myself who really like his early stuff and hate his new stuff and think that he's become kind of self-indulgent and pretentious. I love all of his stuff, but for different reasons. Gun to my head, I prefer his early stuff, but I really do love, like, Inglourious Bastards and Death Proof as well. I have a lot of time for Death Proof. I like to think of it as a remake of Psycho. It's got the same narrative structure and everything, so I like it. Anyway, yeah, Tarantino is one of my favourite writers and directors. He's a master. I feel privileged to be living in a time when he's working, but Reservoir Dogs is definitely my favourite of his movies in terms of just being a nice little neat package of a film, featuring great characters, great dialogue, a great script and just narrative structure, the kind of disjointed circular narrative that he loves so much. And it really does. It's 90 minutes long, which a lot of Tarantino's recent films have been very, like, over 2 hours. But yeah, this is about 90 minutes, and it feels like his most well-rounded film, in my opinion. I know a lot of people argue that Pulp Fiction is, but I prefer Reservoir Dogs. So that I had to have a Tarantino film in my top 20 because he's one of my favourite filmmakers working today. So yeah, Reservoir Dogs gets number 10. Number 9 is another fairly recent film, came out a couple of years ago, and that is Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Now, I never reviewed The Dark Knight, and I've explained in past videos that the reason was that there was no point, everybody was reviewing it, and it kind of felt like a personal movie to myself. When I watched this in the cinema, it was like having an out-of-body experience. I was completely immersed in the film, forgot about all my problems and troubles, and just forgot that I even existed as a person. I was completely in the film, and I could have, I could have cried when it finished. Like, I loved it so much. It's the first time since I was a child that a film has given me that feeling. Basically features amazing performances, especially by the late great Heath Ledger as the Joker. I've actually in subsequent Halloweens dressed up as the Joker myself, and I know a lot of people did, but I just felt such a personal connection with the film. I felt like it was really speaking to me. It's so much more than a comic book movie. It's like Michael Mann directed Batman. It's more of a crime thriller than a comic book film. Just happens to feature people who put makeup on or dress up as a bat. Features one of the greatest opening scenes I think ever filmed. The Joker's bank robbery. Absolutely fantastic stuff, and it had to be in my top 10. So that is number 9, The Dark Knight. Number 8 is my favourite of David Fincher's films, and that is Zodiac. I really do feel like this is his masterpiece. Basically, he made the script from case files, real case files from the Zodiac case back in the 70s and 80s in San Francisco. The film's basically the most accurate retelling of that story that you're likely to see. The cast, I mean, you've got Jake Gyllenhaal, Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr. Absolutely brilliant cast, all do really well. People have complained that Zodiac's overlong. I think it's like 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it doesn't feel it to me. It's got a great pace to it, even though it's a procedural. It really does feel like a fast-paced, fast-moving film. Again, my fascination with serial killer films really extends to this. It's the perfect example of how to do a serial killer film, and again focuses on the people chasing the killer rather than the killer himself. It's basically as well ambiguous. They never caught the Zodiac killer, so he doesn't really give a definitive answer. They say who they think it is, but can't be certain. And I really like the fact that serial killer films have ambiguous endings, because it doesn't feel right when it's all tied up neatly, you know. And obviously it had to happen like it did in real life. So Zodiac is an absolutely fantastic film, David Fincher's masterpiece in my opinion, and I absolutely love it. So that is why it's in my top 10 of all time. Oh, I know this is a top 20 video, but we're in the top 10 now, and I thoroughly recommend it. So that is number 8, Zodiac. Number 7 is a film that I was introduced to recently. A few months ago, Liam DVD Weasel came and stayed over, and we rented this film, and I absolutely fell in love with it straight away. I've watched it so many times since. I think it's borderline perfect, and that is Mysterious Skin, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Brady Corbett. Now, it's about two guys who are roughly my age, I think 19, 20. And they were abused as children, sexually assaulted as children by their softball coach. Now, one of them, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, looks back on this in a sort of romanticised way and sees it as his first sexual endeavour, and really enjoyed it and became gay because of it, realised who he really was. Brady Corbett's character, however, doesn't accept it, and his mind's actually created a story that he was abducted by aliens as a child. So it's about them finding each other as adults and coming to terms with what it was that happened to them as children. And it's just a harrowing, beautiful film, and the performances in it are so just heart-wrenching, and some of the moments, I think the script is amazing, the performances are just incredible, and despite the subject matter, I think it's handled very respectfully. People can say it's really kind of hard-hitting and controversial, but it doesn't show you very much. A lot of the actual abuse, you know, it all happens off camera, you don't actually see anything. And I think it's really brave of the filmmakers. I think it's Greg Araki, however you pronounce it. He's obviously very aware of how to make you think you've seen something that you haven't, and does a great job. Mysterious Skin, one of my favourite films. It's my number 7. I absolutely love it and recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it, or anybody who's been put off by people telling them that it's too kind of controversial, disgusting. Ignore that. I think it's beautiful and harrowing, and it's one of my favourites, so that's Mysterious Skin. Speaking of harrowing films, my number 6 is Darren Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream. Another film that I think I reviewed for the Cigarette Burns, but it's that long ago, but I can't really remember. Basically follows 4 drug addicts as they spiral down into the deep, dark abyss. It's an incredible movie. I absolutely love it, and it's very, like I said, harrowing, and the way it's made, it kind of, as you as an audience member begin to feel like you're going on a trip with them, but you have the benefit of seeing that they're destroying themselves. It's a beautiful film. I absolutely love it. Clint Mansell did the score for it, which is one of my favourite film scores of all time, and I thoroughly recommend it, so that's Requiem for a Dream. That brings us to my top 5 films of all time. Now this is where I suppose it could get a bit pedestrian in my choices, but I make no apologies for that because I absolutely love all of these films. The first of which is my favourite Stanley Kubrick film, and that is The Shining. Now I know that 9 people out of 10 have A Clockwork Orange as their favourite Kubrick film. Mine's The Shining in terms that it's probably the most kind of classical of his films, in the sense of storytelling. I really do love it. It's again one of my favourite horror films. I think that Jack Nicholson's performance in it is incredible, and the way it's shot is absolutely beautiful. The Steadicam was invented for this movie, and those shots are absolutely breathtaking, especially in HD on Blu-ray. And I mean, what can you say about The Shining? It's an absolute classic and an absolute masterpiece, and one of my favourites, so that's my number 5. Number 4 is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, a film that had a lot of influence over one of my favourite filmmakers, as I mentioned earlier, Quentin Tarantino. It's a film that I just think even today has the biggest pair of balls in terms of storytelling. Like introducing who you think is the main character and then killing her an hour into the film. You know, you have an hour of not much happening and then kill the main character, and then the film really becomes what it was intended to be. Absolutely brilliant. It's just the fact that it really plays with your perceptions of what a film should do and what a structure of a film should be. I just really appreciate that, and I think in terms of storytelling it still feels classical but with twists here and there. Absolutely love it, and the performances, oh my god. Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, one of the greatest performances I think ever put to screen. I absolutely just find him frightening today. I actually saw this on the big screen a few months ago. I went with my friend Rachel from work. We went to see Psycho on the big screen. It was playing the BFI re-release, and it was just breathtaking. Now, she had never seen Psycho, and she absolutely loved it. Me, it's one of my favourite films of all time, and is an example of how to build tension and make a scary movie. So my number 4 is Psycho. So my number 3 is Ridley Scott's Alien. Now, this is my favourite Ridley Scott film. I think his legitimately best film, and it was really a toss-up between that or Blade Runner, but my favourite is Alien, and Alien is also my favourite of the Alien series, obviously closely followed by James Cameron's sequel, Aliens. But I really think that Alien is the perfect example of how to do sci-fi horror. It's got all those different elements, horror, sci-fi, it's like a slasher film in space. The acting, it's incredible. You've got Sigourney Weaver making her debut as Ripley, one of the greatest female characters in the history of cinema in my opinion. Alien, again, is a masterpiece. I can't really say too much about it, other than if you haven't seen it, for whatever reason, go and watch it because it's amazing. So that's my number 3, Alien. So that brings me to my second favourite film of all time, and that is Steven Spielberg's Jaws. Now, this is kind of a classic choice. I know a lot of people who have Jaws as their favourite film. It's perfect. It's a perfect film. It's absolutely flawless. It's got one of the most memorable, quotable scripts of all time. It really does become a good old-fashioned adventure film. It's got one of the greatest scores by John Williams, brilliant performances by Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw. And it really does, I think it's one of those movies that really understands the dynamics in a male friendship, even quite a new male friendship. And it's just an exercise in how to build tension and how to scare your audience, and also an exercise in how less is more. I think that, I know people complain about the shark looking fake, but I think you see just enough of it, especially the shots of the shark swimming under the boat and getting a real sense of how big it is. It's just absolutely amazing. I mean, Jaws, let's face it, everybody has seen Jaws. And it is my second favourite film of all time. It's one where if I don't know what to watch, if I don't know what I'm in the mood for, I'll put Jaws in, and just I love it more and more every time I watch it. And again, it's just a film you can quote to no end. Like, I know that my friends and I have sometimes found ourselves singing Show Me the Way to Go Home or Farewell and Adieu to Use Fair Spanish Ladies out of a film for whatever reason, but I absolutely love it. I could just sit here and gush over this film for the next hour, but I won't. So my number 2 of all time is Jaws. Now let's face it, most people who watch my channel are going to know what my favourite film of all time is. And, well, for any of you who don't know, it's Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the greatest action film in the history of cinema, in my opinion, and one of the greatest sci-fi films as well. Obviously the sequel to The Terminator, it's directed and written by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton and Edward Furlong. It's basically, it is another perfect, flawless film in my opinion. It's about the future leader of mankind in the war against the machines, John Connor. An evil Terminator is sent back to kill him, to prevent him forever leading humanity to victory. And another Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is sent back to protect him. It's littered with famous action set pieces and really is an example of how to do action back when action was done properly, when scenes escalated rather than just throwing you in at the deep end. The action scenes in this escalate, and that's what I really like in action movies. The performances are absolutely brilliant, and I think the script is just amazing. In terms of this and the first film, you watch them back to back and it really does come full circle, and the narrative is just perfect and really no mistakes were made. This edition that I've got features like lots of different cuts of the film, one of which, the ultimate director's cut or whatever, I thought was weak when it has an ending set in the future. But I think the extended version, the special edition, is the perfect version of this movie. Also have to mention Robert Patrick, who plays the T-1000, the catalyst in the film. Absolutely brilliant performance by Robert Patrick, doing that famous run that he does that's been parodied so many times in popular culture. And as I said, it just features amazing performances, amazing special effects. Back when James Cameron knew how to use special effects, it's a brilliant mix of practical and then kind of very early CGI, which the way that he uses it along with practical effects means that the special effects still hold up today. It is a film that everybody has to see at one point in their lives, and it is my favourite. I've grown up watching this. I remember when I was in primary school, my friend Joe and I used to come round to my house and watch Terminator 2 like once a week. I could probably quote you the whole script, but it's a 2.5-hour film, so I won't. But again, it's my favourite film. It's really helped define me as a person and my outlook on life. I know that's kind of like anybody watching this who's not really into film may think that's a bit weird, but I know that most people watching this will completely understand when you see a film and it affects you and helps you become the person that you're going to become. So in that regard, Terminator 2 is my #1 film of all time. So there you have it, that's my top 20 films of all time. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's been quite a long one, a lot longer than I expected it to be. We've actually lost daylight, it's been that long. But yeah, thanks for sticking with it. I hope you enjoyed my list. I know some of the choices were somewhat pedestrian, but hey, like I said, I make no apologies for that because they're great films. Thank you to everybody who watches, rates, comments and subscribes. You're absolutely brilliant. If anybody wants to post a video response to this video, feel free. I'd be very interested to see your top 20s. And thanks again, guys. So this is CivilianSnowman signing out. I'll see you later. Bye.